hear that? That's an electric car. And if there is a car that has a name that's more suited to being electric, I can't think of one. But I also can't think of a car whose legend is less associated with light-footed environmentalism. This is the new pure EV Dodge Charger Scat Pack. And it's a bit weird. So Dodge has taken steps to make sure that the new EV Charger is the world's first electric muscle car. Okay. But to me, a classic V8 American muscle car is one of those cars that sounds like it's gargling spanners. It rocks when you rev it. It's got a big V8. And it's really good at doing stupid things like this. You can't do that sort of thing with electric very easily. Or can you?
Okay, so there is a certain amount of self-awareness here. The new Charger is trying pretty hard to push some boundaries when it comes to making electrified muscle. But more on that in a minute.
First, we need some facts. So this is a Dodge Charger Daytona Scat Pack Stage 2, which is the absolute pinnacle of performance for this particular car. And it gets 2 electric motors, one at either end to give 4-wheel drive, and they are both 335 brake horsepower rather than being staggered front to back. That gives you 670 brake and about 627 pounds-feet of torque. The rear motor has a limited slip diff stuffed inside it to help with proper launches, and of course the 4-wheel drive is going to help. In the middle is just over 100 kilowatt hours of battery, which is a lot, and it's been designed to keep its discharge rate no matter how hard you're hammering the car, thanks to a little mode called race prep. Now that conditions the battery, which means that you can go to the drag strip and hit 10.5 second passes at least 10 times without losing any performance, which is more than can be said of some electric cars, which is nice. And it looks, well, it kind of looks like a Charger from the very near future. I don't think it's a design that's going to scare the children, it just looks, well, it looks kind of Charger-y.
This is the 2-door Scat Pack. 4 doors will be arriving in 2025, and there'll be an RT model with just under 500 brake horsepower as well. And in the US at least, it'll be a relatively affordable price. $59,535 for the RT, and just over 73 grand for a Scat Pack like this one. Both of which qualify for the $7,500 US EV grant. And there'll be a 3-litre straight 6 twin turbo petrol with 420 or 550 brake horsepower, so not all is lost if you want gas.
It's also got these really weird little sort of biohazardy symbols all over the car. There's one on the front there, then there's a couple in the wheel centres, and also another light up one on the back. And they're actually called Fratsogs, which is a completely made up name and symbol from the early 1960s, which in Dodge world was supposed to present precision, power and engineering, which they've revived for this car, which kind of makes sense. The thing is, I think that looks like the flux capacitor from Back to the Future, which also kind of makes sense. But they also relate to those, which are exhaust pipes on an electric car. Wait, what? Now that is called a Fratsonic chambered exhaust, and it's a couple of subwoofers and mid-range speakers with a 600 watt amplifier which actually push noise through some chambers underneath the car. And it is incredibly loud. Now it's strong enough to actually rock the car a little bit and give you some of that old school engine vibe. It changes its volume depending on the mode you're in. So if you're in drag mode, it's really loud. And if you're in wet or snow, it completely disappears. And yes, you can switch it off entirely and just have a silent EV. But it's a really weird thing. I can't decide whether this is brilliant or awful, whether it's pantomime or the future of EVs. Have a listen to this and see what you think. No, it's fine. And it also sounds quite cool when you shut it down. And while we're here, the interior is pretty decent. Not stellar, but absolutely workable. It's a slightly driver-centric setup. So you've got these big screens, one directly in front of you, nice big head-up display out in front of the bonnet of the car, and then this central display which is slightly canted towards the driver. Pistol grip, gear control lever, which is actually really nice to hold, squircle steering wheel with the usual buttons either side. There's also the little set of switches here. You've got the drive modes, And you can press that button and it comes up on this screen, or you can cycle between them by using those little toggles. And then on the right hand side, you've got the power shot button. And this car runs at about 630 brake horsepower normally, and then if you want an extra shot of 40 horsepower for overtaking or whatever you're going to do, you hit the power shot button. For 10 seconds you get that extra 40 horsepower. The interesting thing about this Charger as opposed to last generation Chargers is that you have a lot of interactivity. So you've got brake regen of different levels, which is either side of the steering wheel off these paddles, and then on the screen or from the little drive mode button you can have different sets of traction, steering, throttle pedal map. So if you hit the different things, it goes drag, track, sport, auto, wet, snow, custom. But then if you go into the vehicle and go to dashboard, you've got race options and performance pages. Now you can log all of your lap times, you can do all sorts of things. And then if you press race options, you've got extra things like race prep, which is the thing that conditions the battery if you're going to absolutely hammer it. Launch control, obviously if you're going to do a fast launch or a drag strip time. Drift mode, which is when it knocks off the front motor and becomes only rear wheel drive. And a little button that says activate drift mode. Now you should be able to donut the car with that. And then you can do a slip limit for drifting. So you've got basically low, medium and high. That'll give you a different angle depending on how forcefully you're going around a corner. It's a lot of things to get your head around, and it's very different to what a Charger used to be, which always sort of comes across as quite a simple, big engine, rear drive, something you switch the traction control off and you're on your own. This is not that car. You can play with a lot of different things. And then if you change the modes, it's got this band all around the cabin. It's called attitude adjustment lighting. And it's basically a cool little belt line of lights that change depending on what mode you're in, whether the car is charging, whether a door is open, all that kind of stuff. Not things that we haven't seen before, but it's actually quite nice. There's plenty of storage, plenty of places to charge things. There's wireless charging. It's got all the usual stuff like Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay. So it's a solid effort, if not particularly spectacular. Interestingly, I know this is quite a big car, but it is quite practical. There's absolutely acres of space in the back, and more space, in fact, than the old four-door Charger. And it's quite light thanks to the optional panoramic sunroof, although your view is quite limited. Also, if you want to put things in the back, you can flop the seats, and it's got a kind of secret hatchback. Not bad. But what we really want to know is whether it reacts like a proper muscle car. And it does. Kind of. Sort of. I better explain. Okay, so it's definitely got some pace. 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, which is faster than the outgoing Hellcat. About 3.5 seconds 0 to 62 for all us Europeans. And it's got that power shot button on the steering wheel for an extra 40 horsepower if you're doing something like overtaking or wanting that little extra kick. And the thing is, it's got that usual linear kind of whoosh of acceleration that you get with any EV, so it goes. There's a sport mode on the steering wheel for when you want to go a little bit faster on the road, and it's got multi-link suspension at the front, integral link at the back, all independent, and it tightens up the dual valve dampers, so it's actually nicely plush when you're going slower, and then does sort of tighten up a little bit when you're going around some bends. And these are good bends around here, these are great roads. And you know what? On these big, swooping US roads with these nicely radius corners, at least at 7/10, I find it really pleasant. It's a nice car to drive around in. It's like carving canyons at normal speeds. It's useful. And the weird thing is, the noise, that kind of synthesized noise, feels much more naturalistic when you're driving the car because there's a bit of tyre roar, there's more vibration from the road surface, from the car body itself. You just kind of forget that it's not real. And it's got, weirdly, brake regen noise. So when I'm picking a brake regen strength from the paddles, if you set it to max, when you lift off, you can actually hear a different noise as it slows itself on the brake regen. That's actually quite neat. I mean, it sticks well enough if you're not going particularly mental, but it should. I mean, have you seen the size of the tyres? They're staggered fitment, 305s on the front and 325s at the rear, so it's putting down a lot of rubber to the road. It just feels like the weight always pushes the nose forwards, especially if you're on downhill and braking. And it's not that satisfying a car, it's not that precise.
It's also got a range of 241 miles from that big battery, but that's the more accurate EPA American cycle than the made-up European WLTP. It'll charge at 183 kilowatts max, meaning 20 to 80% in 27 minutes, over half an hour for the more usual 10 to 80, which is only okay.
My big conclusion is that this feels much more like a fast cruiser than a particularly aggressive muscle car, and when you are doing the fast cruising bit, it's really good. When you start to want it to be a bit more rebellious, it isn't. And the fact that they're making a big deal about this being, it sounds, feels, looks, drives like a Dodge, like it's a heavy-duty muscle car, I think a lot of that is a little bit lost in translation. It gets untidy when you start to go faster, and that's because it weighs a lot. I mean, this is a car with a 100.5 kilowatt hour battery, which must weigh getting on for half a ton on its own. And it makes the car weigh 2.6 tons or just over. And everything you do dynamically is coloured by the fact that that amount of weight is being hauled around a corner. It might be four-wheel drive, but when you start to push it, even in sport mode or track, it always feels slightly understeery. And I think I thought that a 670 brake horsepower Dodge Charger with a power shot, with some sophisticated dual valve damping, would be a bit more naughty, possibly a little bit more precise. But it just feels heavy and a bit like it doesn't want to do the full bore driving. Now that's not particularly strange because Chargers in themselves, they're the cleavers of the muscle car world. They're not scalpels, but this has gone a bit further the other way. It's been really nice to drive around in, sort of on the freeway and at 7/10. It drives really nicely. It's very quiet when you want it to be. It's got really nice suspension. It brakes, stops, does all the things you want it to very nicely. It's been really strangely efficient. Been doing 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which is crazy. But when you start to hoon it, it rolls its eyes and kind of does it under sufferance. And I wanted a car that made me feel like it wanted to do it a bit more.
But one of the things that catches your attention are the modes, because the Charger Scat Pack gets some really interesting ones. We know what stuff like Auto, Eco and Wet do, and the Sport mode works out here on the nice roads. But how about Track?
And then if you go into track mode, you do alter the throttle map, the steering weight, the noise, and some of the traction control settings, as well as the dual valve damping. And actually it is quite good. This car does feel a little bit less weighty than it does normally, though this is a little bit hard for road work. And you also get to wear a really fun red head condom. And there's loads of other configurable settings in this car. It can even learn the racetrack that you're on and compare your sector times and record your laps from a camera in the front of the car.
Okay, so Track tightens up the damping, weights the steering and allows for faster passes. It works, to a point. But the Charger has too light steering and too much mass to feel really perky. Drag. This includes race prep for the battery, meaning you get all the volts you need, and launch control, giving regular 10.5 second quarter mile times and 0 to 60 miles an hour in 3.3 seconds, with 0 to 62 in about 3.5, which is faster than the outgoing gas Hellcat, but not as fast as something like a Kia EV6 GT with 100 brake horsepower less. Donut and drift.
All you have to do is basically have the wheels straight and then press this button here, and it makes it entirely rear-wheel drive. So you get a full 335 brake horsepower just to the rear axle, and it's got a limited slip diff, so you can do things like this.
Donut makes the car rear-wheel drive and a little bit skiddy, but even though the Charger can do this sort of stuff, it's not particularly leery. And because it cuts the front motor for steer from the rear action, leaving it with just the rear, lots of weight and sticky tyres, it won't do a standing burnout. I know that's an utterly pointless metric, but something I feel a muscle car really should be able to do. So it ends up being fast, but not joyously silly.
In the world of electric cars, horsepower is easy and character is hard. And I think sometimes you've got to throw a few ideas at these things and see what sticks. And I think that's what Dodge is doing here. They're trying to define what a performance EV for their brand is going to be. A bit like a Hyundai Ioniq 5N, but with more Americana. And let's face it, die-hard V8 fans are always going to hate it, no matter how fast or competent it is, because it's electric. I think the problem here is that this Charger Scat Pack isn't fully rebellious. There's some headroom within the range for something with even sharper teeth. And I think that it's the kind of car that possibly would be a daily driver for someone who wants the vibe while that big gas V8 lurks in the garage.